All right. Well, joining me now is the man himself who is primarying Dan Crenshaw and, of course, has the best last name ever, right? Jameson Ellis. No relation, but, who knows? Maybe somewhere back in the family tree. But clearly, because Ellis is such a great last name, I'm very excited that someone with the last name of Ellis is finally running for Congress. So, Jameson, thanks so much for joining me.
No, I definitely appreciate you having me on, and let me just say it's an honor and a privilege to be on your show. And I will say this is that I am a fifth generation Texan at least. That's as far back as I've been able to go. And so,
Nice.
but I don't know if you have any Texas heritage,
Oh yeah,
but
my
we have the
dad's
last,
whole family is from Texas. So
but
what
we
what area then? I guess I
so
mean because you're in the obviously Texas too, but
Yeah,
where is
so
your
I'm
family?
initially from Brady, Texas, and actually Brady, Texas is known as the heart of Texas. It's the geographical center of Texas, and
Great.
so that's where I was born and lived there. We actually have a couple hundred acres out there between Llano and Brady, in a little town called Pontotoc,
All
and
right.
so I love going out there during deer season and just spending time with friends and family out there. It's a whole lot of fun.
Texas is such a great. I mean, it's a whole different country, right? And it's a whole great part of the USA, and I love it. My grandparents obviously, were from there. My dad and his whole family were from there, and so I'm from right outside of Austin, and so have a lot of Texas family. We have the Ellis family reunion, so maybe we
That's
can get
awesome.
all of our Ellis clans together sometime, and do all of that great Texas barbecue. That'd be great.
Hey,
But
that'd be a lot of fun.
yeah, well, next
Really
time
quick,
I'm
you
there, I'll
mentioned
definitely let you know.
so you mentioned Texas, kind of being its own country. So what's really wild about Texas, and that's what I love, is that we have beaches, dirty and clean. We have East Texas, which is like, East Texas. I have a joke that that's where men are men and so are half the women. But then you have North Texas, you have the Hill Country, you have West Texas, and you've got South Texas, and then like far west in El Paso, you've got this desert, right? So we've got mountains, beaches, oceans. I mean, like you rolling plains. So like you name it, and we have it. So it's a huge state.
Yeah, people on the East Coast don't believe me that you can literally drive the entire day and still be in Texas. They don't get that because we can drive on the East Coast through like 6 states in a day. So,
Well, are you
so
talking about Texas? Or are you talking about Houston? Because that's all.
that's a good
Because
point
Houston
too.
is kind of that way. It's like we have a rolling joke. It takes 2 hours to get from Houston to Houston.
Yes,
So,
that's awesome. But so clearly you love Texas. You are a native Texan, and what prompted you to run for Congress, and particularly against Dan Crenshaw in the primary?
so that's actually a very unique story, and I'll try to shorten it up. Sometimes it's hard to keep it super clear and concise and short in the process. But so May 25th is a significant date because number one, it's my birthday, but number two, that's the day 2020, May 25th, 2020 is the day the George Floyd incident happened. And over the next 60 days, we saw over 500 declared riots and over 2,000 law enforcement officers that were injured in the line of duty in a 60-day period. And when I looked at our government leaders, they didn't do a dadgum thing. They sat on their butts. Some of them actually incited even more violence. And so I've been working with a nonprofit, help run a nonprofit called Bridge the Blue, and our whole mission is to help bridge the gap between law enforcement and community. And so, of course, whenever this happened, it made our jobs a whole lot harder. And so there's this whole narrative that we've been having to confront. And so we have a community online on Facebook of over 100,000. It's a mixture of both law enforcement and law enforcement supporters. And so we go live in there and we do what's called a Blue Crew Live. And so we were in the middle of this Blue Crew Live one day, and I am a Christian. And so I felt like what God had put on my heart in the middle of this live was you're dealing with symptoms. So what's going on with law enforcement, BLM, and Antifa, it's a symptom of a much deeper issue. And so I knew in that moment that, okay, we need to treat the symptoms because whenever you're sick, treating the symptoms helps you get through to the end of whatever it is that you have. But if you don't treat the root cause, then it can just keep happening over and over and over again. And so I knew in that
Sure.
moment I wanted to do more. And I didn't know what that looked like, but what was on my heart was Congress. I don't know why, but that's what I felt like God put on my heart. I didn't tell anybody about that because honestly it was a little embarrassing because I'm not a politician. I'm a political outsider. I don't know the first thing about campaigning. And my voting record isn't necessarily the most prestigious. And when I say that, I've always voted Republican, but I've never voted in a primary. And I'd like to talk about this actually. I've never voted in a primary, and I've only voted 4 times. 3 times is all that's recorded because when I voted for Trump, that vote didn't count, and I have the letter to prove it. And so that's also what the haters are trying to attack me on, is my voting record or lack thereof.
Was
But I
that in
love
2020 or 2016?
No, that was 2020. So
Interesting.
so
Okay.
I didn't vote in 2016 because I'm somebody that feels very disenfranchised by a party that gave us John McCain in 2008, Mitt Romney in 2012, screwing over Ron Paul in 2011. So I felt like my vote didn't count. I'm literally a product of the system because the system is set up to protect the establishment, and the best way that they can do that is to keep people apathetic. Most people don't vote, less people vote in primaries, even less people vote in midterms. So I was a product of that system, very much so. It took Trump actually having to wake my butt up. And so now I am more engaged than I've ever been before in my life. And I will say this, I want to make sure I finish that story. So a couple of weeks after God put that on my heart, mind you, I didn't tell anybody. So there was a lady that was in the group, and inside our Silent No More Facebook group, that reached out to me on Facebook. Now, I don't know her. She didn't know me. And she said that she was praying and that God showed her me in Congress. And she pointed out that I had not talked to anybody about it. She said, but it's been on your heart. And whenever she said that, I'm not going to lie, I teared up. Because to me, that was just confirmation that maybe I need to trust God for a next step. So she told me that. That night, I actually told my wife. But we kind of put it on the back burner. And so then we started another charity called One Nation Project, and we've been working on that. And then earlier 2021, about April, May-ish, my good buddy John reached out to me and just said, hey, did you hear that Kevin Brady, which is Congressional District 8, he's not going to be running for re-election? And so I was like, I did not know that. And I said, you know what, I think I'm going to run. And he was like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. And I said, you know what, let me go home, think about it, pray about it, talk to my wife, because I wanted to count the cost. I think too many times people do things without counting the cost. Anyways, long story short, I go home, talk to my wife, I pray, wake up the next morning with a peace about running, but I'm scared to death because of what this could mean. Having my name, my family, extended family, friends all drugged through the mud, trying to expose me, which there's nothing that they can really get on me because I've already exposed all of my failures, my pain, all that stuff. I'm very
But they never go
transparent
after
about all
the
that
truth.
stuff.
They twist everything anyway. So
They
I
do.
mean, no matter what it is, they'll just say something in order to smear. And so you're right to count the cost. I mean, and Jesus himself tells his disciples to do that.
Yeah, he said, if anyone will come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So yeah, counting the cost is very important. So we started out in Congressional District 8, and that's going to be that's Kevin Brady's open seat. And so back in, I want to say it was October, November, the redistricting maps here in Texas were finalized because we just added 2 new districts. And whenever I looked at those maps, I was no longer in Congressional District 8. I was now redistricted into District 2. And so I had to really think about that for a second and say, okay, I've always said, just being a man of principle, that I believe a congressman needs to live in the district. They need to represent the district that they live in. And so I had 2 choices. I could either move out of the district and just uproot where I'm at and move, or I can, go ahead and run against Dan Crenshaw. And so, of course, I made the decision to stay where I'm at, now running against Dan Crenshaw. And the support behind our campaign has just skyrocketed. So I didn't start off in this race to primary Dan Crenshaw, but that's actually where we wound up, and which is very unique because one of the things that I learned, so going back to the Blue Crew Live and hearing God tell me that this is a symptom of a much deeper issue. So when I did my research, and everybody wants to know, where do I do my research at? I go to Conservative Review. So if you go to libertyscore.conservativereview.com, you can look up the voting records of congressmen. So here's what I did is I looked up everyone that we have in the House. So we have 435 voting members of the House. Jenna, let me ask you a question. Out of those 435 voting members, can you take a guess of how many of them actually have true conservative voting records?
Oh, very, very few. And unfortunately, Liz Cheney has one of the highest conservative voting records, even though obviously she is not really a conservative right now. But the scores are actually very, very low. And a lot of them tend to twist what it means to be a conservative. And a lot of sitting Congress members do that in order to pretend and try to manipulate their voting record to say that they're more conservative. So unfortunately, I think it's a pretty low number.
Yeah, so it's less than 40 have conservative voting. So
Wow, I
looked
didn't
at
even know it's that low.
yeah, so then I looked at Texas. So Texas, we have 36 districts. We now have 38, but before we added the two new districts, we had 36. So everybody wants to talk about keep Texas red. Texas ain't red. Texas is purple. So out of the 36 congressional districts here in Texas, less than 13 have true conservative representation, and that's an issue. And so,
Yeah.
I don't believe that Democrats are responsible for what's going on in this country. I believe that it's so-called Republicans in D.C. that are not acting and voting like Republicans. And that's the issue that we have. And that's why the election with 2020 happened the way that it did. That's why I don't believe we even have liberty anymore. I believe that it's an illusion, which is why part of my slogan or my tagline is to restore liberty. Because I don't believe that we really have it anymore. I feel like the deep state or the establishment, they've been working through the system for decades to bring us to the point where we're so dependent on government that whenever you say things like repeal the 16th Amendment, they're like, you're living in a pipe dream. Really? Because it didn't always exist. Right? So there's a lot we could talk about here. So
Yeah, and you know what I love, Jameson, about your story is that there are so many people who have that similar view and outlook and that similar history of saying, I wasn't really that involved in politics. I kind of, saw the news and, paid attention to a few things and really trusted the establishment until President Trump came along. And I think he forced people to get off the fence and to declare and show themselves for who they really are in Washington. And that revealed and evidenced how dark and disgusting the deep state and the establishment rhinos really are. And so there are great people like you who are faith-based Christians and just good, honest, hardworking Americans that are willing to stand up and say, you know what, I am going to fight for this country. I'm going to run for office. And it's people like you that are founders in vision, not the Dan Crenshaws and the, establishment politicos and the politicians who are so well rehearsed that they can't even, answer a little girl at a town hall, and who are stock trading more than Nancy Pelosi. I mean, it's the hardworking Americans that genuinely want to preserve and ultimately, as you said, restore liberty that should be in office and that are running. So I'm encouraged, Jameson, that people like you all over the country in races, like my good friend Robbie Starbuck, who's running in Tennessee. There are so many others, Josh Mandel in Ohio. There are many others that I've endorsed or that have come on this program that are exactly like you, who are running for the right reasons and who are willing to stand up and say, you know what, we need to take our country back. So I applaud you for this. I wish you a lot of success in your campaign, and I hope that people will hear more from you. So where can people find you if they want to donate, reach out to you from media, get in touch with you in your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone wants to learn where I stand on the issues, my website is jamesonellis.com, and Jameson is spelled just like the Irish whiskey, Jameson, and Ellis, of course, like Jenna Ellis, Ellis. So jamesonellis.com. So I do want to point out, because I've had some people say, there's not a whole lot about you on your website. The reason why is because it's a website. Right, it's just there for information, and most people don't read. They read headlines and bullet points. If you really want to learn who I am, then engage with me on social media. So I'm on Facebook, and my handle is @the_Jameson_Ellis all across the social media. So I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Getter, Gab, Telegram, and I feel like I'm missing one.
But basically everything. So I mean,
Yeah.
those are kind of the big top ones. So yeah, and and I've been watching your Twitter and seeing what you're doing, and I think it's great, not just in the context of primarying Dan Crenshaw. I think that's important for someone to do, and I'm glad that you stayed in that race, and I hope that you will gain a lot more traction and supporters, but also that you're just running, period. I think that more people need to step up and make a difference where they can in this country, and whether it's running for office like you, or whether it's just getting out and voting and speaking out and holding our elected officials accountable, we the people need to make sure that we are engaged and involved in our government, because it's supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and we the people have to select who actually represent us in office. And so I wish you the best. When is your key primary date in Texas?
March the 1st.
March 1st. All right. So
But
everyone,
early voting. But early voting starts Valentine's Day.
Wow. Okay. So send Jameson a love letter through a vote, and make sure that you are getting out and turning out in Texas. And I wish you a lot of luck, Jameson. And hopefully I can get you back on the program, sometime as we move forward in February before the primary date. And thanks so much for sharing your story and for your sincere faith and love of country.
No, absolutely. And again, it's an honor and a privilege to be on the show.
Thanks so much.